played on a bass. This is a bass. This is not a guitar. And that was absolutely not the beginning of Master of Puppets by Metallica. But hi, this is a video about Stranger Things and Stephen King. I'm filming this from my dad's old bedroom because I live in a house built in 1972 that my grandparents and my dad and aunts lived in, and this room is currently my husband's music and nerd stuff room. This isn't even my bass. This is my bass. Her name is Daphne. The most recent season of Stranger Things has come out, and it was very fun to watch as someone who both likes metal and has a really, really cool husband. He has played bass in many metal/rock bands, and he is also a uber nerd. When I moved things for filming, I had to move the entire box set of Next Generation Star Trek stuff, and then there's a whole shelf of Star Trek. We have Star Trek novels over here. There's a Buzz Lightyear right out of frame. It's fun being here. I'm a big nerd, he's a big nerd. Anyway, we're going to talk about Stephen King today. So a couple of things I want to get out of the way before I start. One, I have not looked to see if anyone else has done this particular video on BookTube, because I don't want to see that someone has and be influenced by their opinions. If someone else has, that's really great. I'm going to look up the videos after I post this one and see if we had some differing opinions or if we agreed on stuff. If no one has posted it, feel free to tell me your opinions, because these are just mine. These are all mine, my opinions. Two, I tried to stay canonically within the time period Stephen King would have published the stories that I'm going to mention, but for some characters it was just kind of impossible. I also didn't want to do short stories, even though some of his short stories are amazing. Skeleton Crew is so far my favorite short story collection. It has some of the most traumatizing short stories in it. But I didn't want to give someone a short story and someone a novel. It just didn't feel right. So for a couple people I had to play fast and loose with the appropriate book. So it's less maybe... For some of them, it is books that I think that the character itself would like, but for some of them, it's books that if you like this character, you will like this book. You'll understand when I get to it. Third, I'm going to try to keep this really short, so I'm not going to go into heavy detail on any of these, but if you want more detail, I will talk about this ad nauseum in the comments, so just get at me that way. Fourth and finally, I cannot promise that I will not mention spoilers. I'm going to try my hardest not to spoil anything because I want people to experience the joy of seeing the most recent season on their own. However, it has now been out for almost 3 weeks, so if you haven't finished watching it, I don't know how you're avoiding the spoilers anyway, but I'm going to try very, very hard not to spoil anything. The only thing I'm going to spoil is about to happen, so if you want to skip forward maybe a minute, you can do that. So I have a copy of The Talisman. The Talisman is actually not just a Stephen King, it's Stephen King and Peter Straub. It's a combined effort, and I mean to pick it up and read it because if it's mentioned in media, I'm going to pick it up. This one could be used for a couple of different characters given what it's about, and I do believe that it is on purpose that Lucas is reading it to Max at the end of season 4. So we'll just have to see where we go from there. Alright, so this is my cheat sheet. I know you can't read it from here, but there's so many characters in this show. And I tried to do my best with giving each of them the book that I thought was most appropriate, but you may not agree with me on that, and that's fine. Also, you may think that I forgot a character that you want to know desperately what Stephen King book they would read and or what book reminds me of them. Mention it in the comments. I'll assign you one. I have not read all of Stephen King's novels, but I have read enough to know which ones I think would be appropriate. So just go ahead and feel free to communicate with me. I love talking about Stephen King, and I love talking about Stranger Things. So, without further ado, let's get started. I think the first one's kind of lazy. 11 is sort of the main character of Stranger Things. A lot of stuff revolves around her, even though we have our main core of people. A lot of the action happens directly around her. So the book I would recommend for 11 is Firestarter. It is the story about a dad and his daughter who can start fires with her mind after him and his wife were experimented on when they were younger before they had her. This is a really good novel. It's very quick. It has some weird plotting issues that I don't necessarily agree with. It seems that, you know, they decide they want to be somewhere and then it suddenly is. And it is kind of an abrupt ending, but it does have a lot of young girl power. Stephen King really likes his kids to be realistic but strong. And I think that Firestarter will be relatable to 11 because she too has powers that the government is afraid of. I think Mike was a really hard one for me to figure out because Mike is a character that I feel like has devolved over the last 4 seasons. I think in 1 and 2 he was pretty strong. He had good motivations, but in 3 and 4 it's feeling like his motivations are mainly just the fact that he is with Elle, which I hope we see less of in season 5. I don't see Mike as being someone to pick up horror necessarily as his first choice, so that eliminates a lot of Stephen King stuff. But I did end up going with Cycle of the Werewolf. Cycle of the Werewolf was published in 1983. It is a very short novella with some graphic images about a town that is haunted by a werewolf over the course of a year. So every entry is like January, February, March, whatever. But I think Mike would like this because ultimately the werewolf is defeated by a young boy who is one of the only ones in town that realizes something is going wrong. Him and his uncle work together to defeat this werewolf, and I think that Mike would like the sort of kid being smarter than the adult thing that this has going on. Oh, Will. Will is such a sweetheart, and his book easily also could have been something like Firestarter or Cycle of the Werewolf. I liked a lot of the little gang, the like younger kids, giving them books that were about kids by Stephen King because I think they would find relatability in that. I believe that Will would like Carrie, which was published in 1974, so it was kind of old at the time they would start reading things like this, but it's relatively short, and it's about a girl that gets bullied in school, and her superpowers allow her to sort of take revenge on them. And I know what you're thinking, this could easily be Eleven's book too, and you're right, a lot of these could work for multiple characters, but I feel like Will relates the most to Carrie White's being bullied for just who she is fundamentally. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been confirmed 100%, but we as the audience who have critical literacy skills understand what is being told to us, especially in the most recent season, and I think that Will would find some satisfaction in the fact that Carrie gets back at her bullies so tremendously well. And also this is written very easily for a kid their age to understand, so while it is a little longer than the previous two, it is written in epistolary form and in newspaper articles, diary entries. I think Will would like this. I think that he would like Carrie. Full disclosure, the only physical copy I have of the book I'm going to recommend for Dustin is the Hodder edition, and it's like shoved in my bookshelf, so it's not, I'm not bringing it out. I'm just not. But I'm going to recommend for Dustin Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot was published in 1975, and it is about a town that deals with vampires. That is all I can tell you because I have just historically decided not to read Salem's Lot. It's not out of not wanting to or not being interested in it. It's just me and a group of my friends joke that it's going to be the one Stephen King book we forget to read when we're old, and I just like that joke so much I haven't picked it up. He has enough books for me to read before I even think about getting to that. But I think, I don't know, Dustin, with the way he dealt with Dart and the other like demodogs in season 2, and the way he seems to be the only one that's like paying attention to non-11 related stuff, I feel like he would really enjoy the vampire novel Salem's Lot. Lucas is another one that for me, I don't think that his first genre of choice would be horror, but I can see him getting into dystopians and sort of survivalist text. And so I'm going to be so nice to Lucas and give him my favorite Stephen King / Richard Bachman novel, and that is The Long Walk. For those of you who are Stephen King fans, you know that he wrote under the pen name of Richard Bachman for a while, and he wrote some really, really, really graphic stuff as Richard Bachman. Richard Bachman tended to do the dark stuff that Stephen King didn't. But The Long Walk is about a competition where a bunch of teenage boys can sign up to be a part of a 100 marching group of boys. They have to walk at a speed of 4 miles per hour, and the winner is the one who doesn't die. It's very good. The entire cast is fantastically developed. You really get to know these guys, and it's amazing the stuff they can do while walking at 4 miles per hour, which by the way is faster than you think it is. But I think Lucas would enjoy this. It has some athleticism to it. It has some real heart, and Lucas, as much as they said in season 4 that like Mike is the heart, Lucas is a lot of the heart. Dustin is a lot of the heart, and I feel like those two finally got a chance to really shine this season, and I'm excited to where they're going to go in season 5. But that being said, I think Lucas would like The Long Walk. This was published in 1979. I think that also, since Lucas is reading The Talisman to Max, I think that maybe he likes that book, or he knows that she would like it. So we could put The Talisman for him as well. For Max, okay, we can go the easy route. We can make it the Talisman. We can make it Firestarter. We can make it Carrie. We can make those novels that are about sort of like young girls and young characters doing really cool stuff. But for Max, I want to give Max the entirety of the Bachman books. So the Bachman books came out in 1985. This bind up specifically, and it actually has a like intro about Richard Bachman at the front of it, where Stephen King explains why he created sort of this other person to write these novels. And the Bachman books consist of 4 books: Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, and The Running Man. And you may recognize The Running Man. It was a sort of sci-fi dystopian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, and it is about that, a man trying to win money from the government. Roadwork is a man who hears voices in his head, and he doesn't like that the government is doing road work in his yard. I didn't like road work personally. The Long Walk is also in here, so I can see Max and Lucas bonding over the fact that they both like The Long Walk. And also it contains Rage. Rage is about a school shooter. You can actually not find this bind up easily anymore because Stephen King will not let Rage be printed anymore because of the nature of the school shooting being the subject of it. But I can see at the time, for when the time period this came out, I can see Max reaching for this as sort of like a way to read multiple novels at once, and also to be kind of like ooh, you're all reading Stephen King, I'm reading Richard Bachman, and I'm sure she could fool some of her friends into not realizing that it's Stephen King. But I think she would like this entire bind up. I think she would definitely be a fan of Richard Bachman's darker stuff. So Nancy Wheeler is one of my favorite characters. She was also hard to pick for because she is, while she's not traditionally feminine in some aspects, I just don't think horror is a genre that she goes for. So I had to pick the book that was kind of the least horror for me, and she also could have another one on this list that I, think she might agree with. This one was published much later than the canon timeline we're currently on. It was published in 1994, and it is Insomnia. And Insomnia is about an older man who can't sleep. And because he can't sleep, he starts seeing things. And because he can see things, he starts to see this plot where people are trying to do bad things in the town of Derry, Maine, because Derry is a very big place in Stephen King's novels. He meets up with an older lady, and they work together to solve sort of the problem arising in town. But I just think that emotionally and like relationship-wise, this will be something that Nancy likes. When Stephen King crafts stories around strong romantic relationships or family relationships, I feel like that's where he shines the most, when the things matter because those people matter to each other, and this one does a really good job at that. It does end a little bit sad, but a lot of his novels do that. They end like bittersweet. But I think Nancy would kind of like this. It doesn't have a lot of graphic horror to it. It is a little bit more fantastical, but it is very much people being smart with the things they are given to them. So this one I recommend for Nancy. Oh, everyone's favorite crush, Steve Harrington. Steve the Hair Harrington. For Steve, I have 2 options. We have a canon, like, appropriate one, and then we have one that I just think that Steve would like, and he wouldn't tell anybody that he liked it, but he did. Steve is sort of our resident car guy, if there is one. He's always the driver, it seems like, and I recommend Christine. It was published in 83. I think he could like this. I think also he would like the sort of coming of age idea behind this, and sort of the losing your first love, because, spoiler alert, that happens in this. However, if we're going for non-canon, I think Steve would like Lissie's story, about the wife who has to go basically to like the afterlife to save her husband even in death. I think Steve is a real big romantic at heart, and he would really like this story. So those are the 2 I recommend for Steve. I'm giving Jonathan it just for a lack of better option to do, but a core motivation in this story is a brother trying to do what's right for his brother, trying to find his brother, trying to keep other people from losing their family, and I think that Jonathan would really, really appreciate that, especially given season 1 and part of season 4. This is a guy who just, flaws and all, he's going to defend his brother, he's going to try to do what's best for him, so I think it, in that regard, would be something that he would read. I'm going to give Robin Buckley a book that I also kind of think Nancy would like. I could see them doing a book club and reading it together. And that is Rose Madder. It was published in 1995. Again, this is not canonically possible, but this is the story of a woman who leaves her abusive husband, and she goes and moves and starts her own life. She does her own thing, but he is slowly stalking her. She doesn't know it, but he's slowly stalking her. There's a picture that comes to life. There's Greek mythology involved. There's a lot of like girl power in this book. It is really hard to read. I also do not recommend it if you have any kind of traumas related to domestic abuse, because it is pretty bad. And it's kind of ACAB, so I'm here for that. But Rose Madder, very good. I think those two would enjoy it, but Robin maybe more so than Nancy. Billy doesn't read. I kid. Okay, if Billy read Stephen King, I can see him liking Rage by Richard Bachman, because of course he would. But I also can see him enjoying The Darker Half. The Darker Half is one of the first novels written after Stephen King revealed he was Richard Bachman, and it is about a man who wrote under a pen name and wrote some really horrific stuff under that pen name, but then he decides to retire it, and the guy who the pen name is like named for, like that fake guy, comes to life and is like killing people in his way to kill this author, because there can only be one person. So it's sort of this like battle against your darker urges and your like good urges. And now I am not in the camp that forgives Billy for anything, because I remember how much of a racist asshole he was in season 2. That does not forgive him from doing one good thing in season 3. So anyway, if Billy read The Dark Half, that'd be a good one for Billy. It'd be a good one for Billy fans. That's all I'm saying. If nothing else, I'm really glad season 3 and season 4 gave us more of Erica Sinclair. I think she is a phenomenal character. That actress does a great job with her. I also do not see her necessarily picking up horror, much like her brother Lucas, but I can see her looking at survivalist things, which is why I'm giving her 1999's The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This is one of my favorite Stephen King's. It's very short, very easy to read. It's about a little girl who gets lost in the woods, and she has to get herself out of the woods. And she is being stalked by something that is unnameable in the woods. It is very good. It shows a very smart, young protagonist, and I think Erica would love that. She would get right into this. So everybody's new favorite, like white boy of the month, is Eddie Munson. And I can agree with that. I think he's a really great character. Like I said, it was really fun to see someone who's like really into music and metal, but also he's this big nerd and he's really nice. Because I grew up with a lot of guys like that. And you know, they're few and far between, but like they do exist, and it's nice to see him represented that way. Eddie, while he is into metal, and I'm sure he likes horror, he is also a dungeon master and plays D&D, and he is very well versed in Lord of the Rings, as he talks about that at some point. I recommend a book I have not read, and that is The Eyes of the Dragon. This actually is a first edition that I found at a thrift store, and it has like a textured cover. Anyway, I'm not bragging, but I think it's a cool looking book. The Eye of the Dragon was published in '84, so it would have just come out. Like if he read it, he would have been like one of the first readers of it. And it is basically just a fantasy of like princes and kings and like magic and all kinds of stuff like that. I think this may be related to the Dark Tower series, and I only say that because it mentions Flag and King Roland, and I know Flag comes back up in the Stand, and Roland is in the Dark Tower, and there's just a bunch of stuff with that I don't know because I haven't delved too deeply into Stephen King's fantasy worlds. But I do believe that Eddie would like this book. I also believe he would let it influence his campaigns. I also would like to recommend something completely different for Eddie, and I'm not saying this just because he's my new favorite right now, but also I think Eddie would be a Joe Hill stan, and that meaning, Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, who also writes horror. I think he would like Heart-Shaped Box because it is about an older, like, metal rock dude being haunted by things. Like, he seeks out haunted materials, and so I think he would like that book. I also believe he would like Horns because Horns is about a guy who gets falsely accused of murdering his girlfriend. He wakes up and he has horns on his head. This is a lovely book. It's terribly graphic. So warning for that, but it is really good. And Eddie, the person who is being like falsely accused of murdering Chrissy, I think he would really relate to this. So those are my many recommendations for Eddie Munson, things he would read. Anyway, moving on. Okay, the last two characters are going to get lumped together. It's Joyce and it's Hopper. It's everybody's favorite parents. And I don't think they would read Stephen King. However, I do believe that both of these books would be relatable to them and that they would enjoy them, given the nature of being a parent and grief that they talk about. For Hopper, I can see Pet Sematary. It is a story about a man just trying to do his best and raise his family, and he moves them to a place where there's a really dangerous road. And if you've seen the movie, you know what happens. One of his children gets hit by it, but luckily there's this haunted cemetery that if you plant stuff in it, they will come back. Will they come back completely the way they're supposed to? Probably not. But I believe that he has dealt with loss enough that he would understand the dad's struggle in this. When I first read this, I was not prepared for it to talk so much and so like lovingly about this idea of grief. Like what kind of grief would bring you to like dig up your child, carry them for miles to bury them somewhere so maybe they will come back in some capacity. It's kind of horrific. But I think he would understand that given the nature of his parenthood into having his first daughter and being a parent to Elle. I think he would recommend it to Joyce, but I do not believe that she would read it. For Hopper and also for Joyce, I think they would both enjoy The Shining, which I know at its core it's basically a haunted house, like gothic horror. I mean, if you haven't thought about it that way, maybe you should. But it is also about a dad who's trying his best, and he has his demons he's trying to face. And I think that both of those people feel that the things they've done in the past maybe affect how they are as a parent, but in the end, you know, sacrifices are made, and the dad does what he's supposed to do in here, but also it has a really cool kid character. So I think that maybe Hopper would like that one. Maybe Joyce would like that. For Joyce, I also recommend Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, which is about a woman who is convinced that she can find a shortcut to anywhere, and she will find a faster one every time. And it just reminds me of the determination that Joyce has to help her son pretty much at any point, to help Hopper at any point. She is willing to do what needs to be done to get something done. She does not like being told no, and she can't be told no. So that's what I think she would read. That is a short story, but it's the one caveat I'm going to let myself have. So that is all I have here. That is everyone that I listed. If I didn't include someone that you think I should have included, like that's a bigger character than you're allowing it to be, sure, ask me. I'm sure I can come up with something for them. And if you're wanting any more information on these books and why I recommended them for the characters I did, please let me know. I'm not entirely happy with all these suggestions, so if you've got one and you've read a book that I haven't, let me know. There are other really good books that could have been in this list, okay? Needful Things is really amazing. It's about a small town being haunted by a devil. Doomakey is about a man who is like haunted by the image of this woman and he's trying to save his daughter. All these books that involve like families and sort of helping someone like past the point of being physically able to do it. I really like those and I'd like to recommend them, but all of them were published in like the 90s, so they're a little bit too old. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. If you have any opinions on this, let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have not, go on and watch Stranger Things. Now is a great opportunity to. You know why? You know why Skeleton Crew is like my, let me get close. You know why Skeleton Crew is like my favorite short story collection? It has The Jaunt in it. Have you read The Jaunt? You need to look it up. Read The Jaunt. 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 Okay? It is terrible. It is so bad. Existential horror at its best. I think about it daily. And I knew what the plot was before I read it, and I still thought about it. And I especially think about it now that they just released the cool images from the telescope. Chills. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I did. I had a good time. Anyway, I'm going to get out of my husband's room now.